Are you ready to take your web application to the next level and make it available to the world? Well then, you've come just to the right place. In this video, I'm going to show you how to prepare your application, be it static or dynamic, for deployment. From optimizing your code for performance to setting up your environment variables and deploying it to your hosting provider. I've got you covered. So sit back, relax, and get ready to launch your application into the stratosphere. Hello everybody. Welcome to Coding 101. My name is Skutlo. This is my channel. It's called Coding 101, and I am on a mission to making you a better developer one video at a time. So make sure you check out my channel for more content like this that helps you become a better developer each day. And make sure that you subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, then you can just like it. And if you have any comments, make sure that you leave them in the comment section. So without wasting any much of your time, I'm going to illustrate a couple of steps that you can take to make sure that your application is deployment ready. So the first thing that you have to do is you need to check your code. This is just one of the code for some of the projects, one of the projects that I was doing in my previous video, which is password recovery. So make sure you check it out if you are very interested in that. So the first thing that you need to do is to check your code. You need to make sure that it's clean and it's error-free, because having to fix an error while the code has been deployed is quite a hassle. So it's always better to fix your errors locally than having to fix them in production mode. So this means going through your code and fixing any bugs, syntax errors, or warnings. You can use tools like ESLint or Prettier. They can help you structure your code and really see errors much more easily. You can just go to the extension aspect of your code and just search for Prettier. So Prettier is a very good code formatter that I would highly suggest because I use it in my code. It is a great way to improve the readability of your code base. Prettier helps you to become a little bit consistent with your code style across all of your projects. It can be configured to automatically format your code, and that can save you a lot of time in the long run. So I'd recommend using Prettier in order to check out your code, but you can also use ESLint as well. And once you have fixed any issues, you should also run your tests to ensure that everything is working as expected. So that is the first step. You need to look through your code for errors, you need to run your tests, and solve any bugs that you might have in your code. Now the other thing that you might want to do is that you might want to optimize your code for performance. Now, one of the tools I highly recommend when it comes to optimization is Google Lighthouse. I have a video that I'm going to tag in my cards at the top on how to use Google Lighthouse, because it really helps you fix the performance of your application. It helps you with SEO. It helps you with accessibility, and it gives you some of the best practices when it comes to development. Lighthouse is an open source automated tool for improving the performance of your web page. So I highly recommend it when it comes to performance optimization. But some tips that you can take in order to optimize your application is try reducing the number of HTTP requests that you have, try optimizing your images, and try using tools like Webpack, Babel, and gzip to help reduce the size of your code, because what they help to do is that they minify your code. They make your code small so that it doesn't have to affect the performance of the entire application. So instead of having many JavaScript files, what these applications or what these tools like Webpack, Babel, and gzip, what they're going to help you with is that they're going to compress your application so that it's easier to process or it's easier to run and all that kind of stuff. So you should also consider lazy loading your components and using code splitting to reduce the initial load time of your application. Alright, so the next step is that you need to set up your environment variables. So this is quite important. You need to set up a separate file to store your environment variables. And if it is the case that maybe while you are coding, you hard-coded your passwords, like I've been guilty of this, whereby I set up my database and I put in the passwords instead of putting the password through my env file. So you need to make sure that you scan through your code and any critical information like that is put separately in a separate file. Now, because that file is in your local environment and it is not being pushed, assuming that you have git ignored that env file, and it is not being pushed to your repository, what you need to make sure you need to set up your environment variables for your production environment. because sometimes your code is not running and you wonder what's the problem. It's because you've not set up your environment variables for your production environment. So this means that you need to create a .env production file and setting up any necessary variables such as API keys, database connection strings, and other configuration settings. And what you also want to do is that you want to make sure that any sensitive information is encrypted and is not put in directly in your env file. So that means you encrypt that information so that it's not exposed even to people that maybe you don't want them to see. Okay, so the next step, the fourth step, is that you need to build your application. Let me just show you a little bit of something over. Let me show you a little bit of something over here. So this is our client side of our application. So what you need to do is that you need to build your application. So you can use npm run build command to create a production ready build of your app. This will create a build folder. So in this case, if we were to build this application right here, the Vite is going to create a folder known as dist. This is where it's going to put in our static files. This is where our static files are going to be put in. So why is it necessary to build your application? You're building your application in order to compress everything that you've written here to simplified or minified files that can be ran, right? So your application now becomes small and easy and very simple and performance effective. So that is why it's important for you to build your application. And after you've built your application, now you are ready to deploy your application. Finally, it's time to deploy your application. This is the last step. There are many ways to deploy your application depending on your hosting provider. Some popular options include AWS. I have a video whereby I'm teaching how to deploy your application to AWS EC2 server. And there's also the Heroku option. I also have a video that teaches how to deploy to Heroku, so I'm going to leave it in the card so you can check it out. You can also deploy to Netlify, and you can deploy to GitHub as well. I'm going to create, my next video is going to be showing you how to deploy a React app to GitHub. You'll need to follow the instructions of your hosting provider, whatever hosting provider that you choose. You need to follow the instructions on how to deploy your applications. It's not monolithic, it's not the same throughout. You need to follow those instructions and make sure to test your applications thoroughly after deployment to make sure everything is working correctly. And the other thing that you have to actually do, which is very important, is that you need to do cross-browser testing. Now your application is going to be accessed by many different people, and people use many different devices and they use many different browsers. So you need to make sure that your application is simple enough to run in many of these devices and many of these browsers. So you need to do cross-browser testing. So you need to test and see whether your application runs perfectly in an iPhone, or your application runs perfectly in an Internet Explorer browser, or your application runs properly in an Opera Mini browser. So this is a tool that you can use over here. Browser Stack is a tool that you can use in order to do cross-browser testing. There's a free option that you can use. I believe when you sign up, they give you a free option to use. You can also use another one called Lambda. I'm going to leave its link in the description, that helps you to just like test your application in many different browsers, because you might write an application and then later on you find out that it's not running on Microsoft Edge, and that's going to be a disadvantage if many of your customers are in Microsoft Edge. So it's very important to do cross-browser testing. You can do cross-browser testing after you've deployed your application, or you can do cross-browser testing probably before, but I usually do it after I've deployed, so you can either way, it's still fine. And there you have it. Those are the steps that you need to take to prepare your React app for deployment. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If it was helpful, make sure that you like this video. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section. The reason why I did this video is that many of you were responding to my AWS EC2 deployment video, so I just wanted to elaborate on a few things regarding deployment. So if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you like it. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.